My fiancé said, "I'm inviting my bestie to our honeymoon. He needs a vacation." I nodded. Then I canceled our flights and rebooked the trip with my own best friend. What she found on my desk a week before our wedding. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. You know, it's funny how you can look back on things and see the exact moment a relationship started to go wrong. At the time, you just brush it off, make an excuse, or tell yourself it'll get better. You do it because you love the person and you want to believe that the good stuff outweighs the bad. I did that for years with Sarah. She was the woman I was going to marry, the one I had my whole future planned with. But even back then, there was a shadow in our relationship, and his name was Mark. I met Mark the same way most boyfriends meet the male bestie, at a party, maybe a few months into the relationship. He seemed harmless enough, and I genuinely tried to be cool with it. I figured everyone has friends. What I didn't realize was that he wasn't just a friend. He was a constant, and I was the variable. It started small. A text from him at 11 p.m. while we were watching a movie. Sarah would immediately pause the TV, get up, and walk into another room to reply. When I'd ask who it was, she'd just say, "Oh, just Mark, he's having a tough night." It was always a tough night. Over time, it got worse. We'd plan a weekend trip, and a day before we left, she'd ask if it was okay if Mark tagged along. "He's just feeling really lonely," she'd say, as if his loneliness was more important than our time together. Our dinner dates became a trio, with him sitting across the table, cracking jokes and dominating the conversation while Sarah giggled along. I tried to talk to her, to explain that I felt like a third wheel in my own relationship. I wasn't trying to forbid her from having friends. I was trying to have a girlfriend. But every conversation ended the same way. She'd get defensive, say I was being insecure and controlling, and tell me that if I truly trusted her, I wouldn't have a problem with her best friend. After a while, I stopped bringing it up. It wasn't worth the fight, and I foolishly held onto the hope that after the wedding, things would change. The honeymoon was going to be a fresh start, the first real time it would just be us, without the constant presence of Mark. I remember this one time, maybe a year and a half ago. We were going to go on a nice romantic walk, and I had a surprise picnic planned. Everything was perfect until my phone buzzed with a text from Mark, on Sarah's phone, because she had left it with me. It was a selfie of him and Sarah at the beach, with a caption that said, "So glad you came, babe. We totally needed this." I knew then that she was lying to me about where she was, and she was spending time with him behind my back. I confronted her, and she got angry, saying I was snooping, and that it was a huge invasion of her privacy. She never once apologized for lying. She just blamed me for being jealous. That incident should have been the end of it, but like an idiot, I just wanted to make things work. I loved her, and I convinced myself that once we were married, Mark would finally take a back seat. I had to believe that, because the alternative was too painful to think about. The wedding was just over a month away, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was genuinely excited. We were sitting on the couch, surrounded by brochures for tropical resorts, the ones with the clear blue water and overwater bungalows. We had already booked the flights and the resort for a 2-week honeymoon in the Maldives. It was going to be our escape, our fresh start, a time for just the two of us to reconnect without any outside interference. I truly believe this would be the thing that finally reset our relationship and put us on the right path. "Look at this one," I said, pointing to a picture of a couple having a private dinner on the beach. "I've already booked us a reservation there for our first night." Sarah smiled, and for a second, it felt like the old us. Then she set down her brochure, her smile changing into something casual and almost dismissive. It was the same expression she always had right before she said something she knew I wasn't going to like. "So, I've got some good news," she said, her tone bright and breezy. "I was just talking to Mark. He's been having a really rough time lately, you know, with his ex and everything. He's so stressed out. I told him we had an extra spot on the honeymoon trip. He can totally come with us." I swear the air went out of the room. I just stared at her, waiting for the punchline, for her to tell me she was kidding. But her expression was earnest. My heart, which had been buzzing with excitement, sank like a stone. It wasn't just the words, it was the nonchalant way she said them, as if it were a perfectly normal, compassionate thing to do. She didn't ask me. She told me. The honeymoon, the one thing I had been holding on to, the one thing that was supposed to be ours, was already compromised. All the months, all the conversations, all the times I had swallowed my feelings, it all came flooding back in a tidal wave of crushing disappointment. I wasn't angry. I was done. There was no rage, no shouting, just a profound, bone-deep weariness. In that single moment, I saw our entire future laid out before me, and it was a permanent table for three. It was crystal clear that she had no intention of ever setting a boundary with him, even for the most intimate trip of our lives. My hope for a new beginning died right there on the couch. I realized then that this wasn't just about a honeymoon anymore. This was about respect, and I had been fighting a losing battle for years. My patience, my willingness to understand, my love, she had taken it all for granted. I finally understood that I couldn't change her, and I couldn't save our relationship. I could only save myself. So, I did what I had learned to do best. I didn't fight. I simply nodded. Okay, I said, the word feeling foreign and heavy in my mouth. Perfect. A relieved smile spread across her face. She thought she had won. She thought she had talked me down from being insecure one last time. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't agreeing. I was making a choice. And in that moment, as she happily started texting Mark to tell him the good news, I had already decided that the honeymoon was going to go on as planned, just with a completely different guest list. After that night on the couch, the air between us felt different. I wasn't just quiet, I was resolved. The days leading up to the wedding, which should have been a whirlwind of excitement, felt methodical. I wasn't planning a wedding anymore. I was planning an exit. My first move was to deal with the honeymoon. I called the airline and the resort. It was a hassle, of course. I had to explain that there was a change in plans and navigate the customer service menus. It took a few calls and a lot of holding, but I managed to get her name removed from the reservations and a credit applied to the account. Then, with a quiet sense of finality, I rebooked everything. Same resort, same flights, same dates. But this time, I used my best friend Mike's name. I didn't get rid of the honeymoon. I simply took back what was mine. When I called Mike to explain, I didn't beat around the bush. I just laid it all out. The history with Mark, the honeymoon demand, and my decision to pull the plug. Mike, who had seen me put up with this for years, just listened. His only response was, "Dude, I'm in. Let's get you a beer." That simple validation, from a guy who's known me my whole life, made me feel like I was doing the right thing. It wasn't a reckless act of revenge. It was me taking a stand for my own sanity. All the while, Sarah was completely oblivious. She was busy with last-minute wedding details, happily talking to her friends and family about the honeymoon trio. She'd mentioned Mark's excitement, and I'd just nod along, a silent observer in my own life. She had no idea that I had already disconnected from our relationship. She thought she was winning, and I was just letting her. The climax happened a week before the wedding. I was in the garage, working on my bike, when I heard her call my name from inside. Her voice was sharp, a little panicked. She was looking for our passports, which I had put in a manila envelope on my desk. She needed to check the expiration dates or something. I didn't answer immediately. I just listened. The silence after her gasp was heavy, broken only by the distant sounds of traffic. A moment later, I heard her footsteps coming toward me. She was holding the manila envelope, her face pale and twisted into a mask of confusion and betrayal. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Why are these tickets for you and Mike? What have you done?" I looked at her, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel a flicker of fear or guilt. I felt a quiet, icy resolve. This was it. The conversation I had been mentally rehearsing for years was finally here. "I just did what you asked," I said calmly, leaning against my workbench. "You told me you wanted a group trip for our honeymoon. I just chose the group." Her eyes went wide with a mixture of shock and fury. "This isn't a group trip. This is our honeymoon. You can't just do this. You're ruining everything," she shrieked, gesturing wildly with the tickets. "No, you ruined it," I replied, my voice completely steady. "The honeymoon was the one thing I held on to. The one thing I hoped would be just for us. You couldn't even respect that. You wanted Mark there more than you wanted a fresh start with me." She tried to pivot, her voice suddenly pleading. "It was a joke. I was going to uninvite him. You know I was. I just needed to make him feel better first. Don't do this, please. I shook my head slowly. That's what you always say, Sarah. It's always a half-truth, a lie, or an excuse. I don't believe you. And I can't live a marriage where I have to constantly worry about what lie you're telling to keep him happy. The argument wasn't about the tickets anymore. It was about all the years of disrespect. I listed everything off, one by one. The canceled dates, the late-night texts, the time she made me feel like an insecure idiot for wanting to be her number one. I wasn't yelling. I was just stating facts, like a lawyer presenting evidence. Then, I delivered the final blow. This trip with Mike isn't a honeymoon, Sarah. It's my bachelor party. Because the wedding is off. The color drained from her face. She looked at me, completely speechless. She started to cry, but it was a different kind of crying this time. Not the angry tears she used to weaponize against me, but a panicked, desperate wail. She finally understood. This wasn't about a trip. This was about the end. I've already canceled the venue, I continued. I got most of the deposits back. The caterers, the DJ, it's all handled. The wedding's not happening because I won't start a marriage with someone who has no respect for me. Her knees gave out, and she sank to the floor, her hands over her face, the tickets crumpled in her grasp. All the bluster, all the confidence, all the casual cruelty that had defined her for years, it was all gone. She finally had nothing left. I just stood there for a moment, watching her. Then, I turned around and walked out of the garage. The silence that followed was the first real peace I had felt in a very, very long time. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Share it in the comments.